Hi and welcome everyone. This is another exciting new episode of Data Product Management in Action podcast, and I'm your host Frannie Helforoush, joining my lovely guest Katy Pusch. Welcome to the podcast, Katy.
Thank you very much. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining. Also, a quick disclaimer that we are all representing our own views and we're not representing the views of our company. Okay, can you give us a brief intro to yourself, your background? How did you get into the data product management world? A little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. So my name is Katy Pusch, as you said. At the moment, I'm a senior product line director at a company called Trendtech. But really why I'm here is that I have a pretty vast background in data product management. Before it had a name, I was doing data product management back in, the 2015 timeframe. So over time, I've built and launched and managed and sunset about 13 different data products. Now, 11 of those are B2B. So I do have a slant towards B2B in my background specifically, as opposed to B2C products. And 4 of those were brand new builds. So I have a fair bit of experience launching new things in my career. The other stat that I love to share with people when I'm speaking about data products is that 54% of the products that I have ever launched are now dead. And so not every product is a story of a product that grows and lives on forever. Some of those products that are dead were sunset because they were no longer meeting the needs of the company. But some of those products achieved the goals, the strategic value that they were intended to achieve sort of in a short lifespan. And then we moved on as a company to bigger and brighter things. And they were part of the learning journey. So just to say, everybody out there, don't get discouraged if you launch something and then it doesn't live on forever. We all experience that bittersweet goodbye moment for our products. So yeah, I think that's maybe me in a nutshell.
Thank you so much for sharing. Oh, that's so true. It's actually a balance and an art to know when to retire a product and not to spend, more time or money on it when it's not really bringing value anymore. So that's actually a good thing, not a bad thing. Great. So 11 B2B and 4 brand new. So what type of data products were they?
Yes. The products I've had the most experience with, I would classify as decision support type products. And by that, I mean, I think that if we cast a broader net when we define data product management, it can also include things like machine vision and LLMs. And of course, all of these things are built on data at their core and leverage data science, machine learning. But my products have all been decision support tools based on numbers and analytics. In some cases, definitely some machine learning, some regressions, some low-level algorithms. But for the most part, the value that my data products are trying to add is that a stakeholder, a user, a customer needs to be able to make a decision or take an action, and my product is providing them with the information to make a better decision or take a better action.
That's great. How did the end product look like? Was it a dashboard? Did it have a front end? Was it like an integrated data product?
Yeah, I've spun the gamut on that. I started out my career with data products that, well, I'll give you an example. My very first product that I was responsible for, it was not my vision. I didn't build it from scratch. I had the benefit of having a fantastic mentor who was the visionary behind this product. It was a hiring assessment. And I will, as I go into this example, I'll just give a brief disclaimer of there are some hiring assessments in the world that have, problematic bias and things of that nature. And I'm fairly well versed in those topics because I was close to it for a little while. I would like to assure the dear listeners that, I was very proud of this product. I think the visionary who created the product, did a fantastic job of partnering with universities to make sure that this hiring assessment was evidence-based and corrected for any potential bias in the data, so that I think that this hiring assessment in particular was probably leveling the playing field for candidates for the type of position that we were hiring for, as opposed to increasing bias. So that's my little disclaimer that I want to say as I talk about hiring assessments. But the hiring assessment itself started out as primarily an inventory. The assessment itself, it's a questionnaire, right? People are responding to the questions, and we have a database of answers of questions correlated to people's results actually on the job, and how that correlates to their answers to some of these different hiring questions. And that in itself is a data product. It was using machine learning. It was on a customer by customer basis, also improving and tuning the results according to what was most successful in their environment and what types of responses were helpful. But that in itself, the software component, if you would, was really a questionnaire that could be collected from SurveyMonkey, if that's what you were using, right? So it wasn't really that software had to be built to power that part of the experience. Now, there was, of course, a software component of inviting people to take the assessment, and then we did have a place where we could share those results via a dashboard. But I want to just sort of basically talk about the fact that the data piece, the real value, the machine learning, was all happening behind the scenes. I think that sometimes we're in that situation where we lead a data product, but it's difficult to touch or feel or see what it's doing. And that's been part of the lesson that I've taken forward with me from that experience. So from that very early experience, then I've also been responsible for dashboards, like primarily just doing connecting to a database and then being able to slice and dice data and present it in a dashboard format. In both of those very early examples in my career, they really hinged and depended on professional services to deliver these items to customers and explain where that value was coming from and give some idea of what was happening under the covers so that the customers could appreciate the value of what they're receiving and really just navigate to get full value out of it, because it's not very self-explanatory. It's not really a fantastic user experience. And we were having to insert a human in the loop to really connect the dots on that. I'm going to pause right there because I don't want to, give a lecture for the next 45 minutes, but to see if there's any questions. But I would say that was sort of phase one of my career, was that early experience with really leaning on services to be a key part of the experience. And then I'll continue on by talking about the next phases of my career, unless you have any questions about that first part.
I have a comment because this is so interesting. Because we usually, when we mix user interface with data product, is the end result. So you create a data product and then you want to visually represent it somehow, and then you mix it with some kind of a user interface. It's either is a dashboard or is another software or a web page. But what you were mentioning is even building that data product, how you gather this data, like via that questionnaire, that was also part of the experience, which is honestly new to me. Because, like I said, it's always, we do have the data and then we partner it with some kind of visualization. Now you add a visualization, get the data, create a data product, and then another visualization to represent it, which is very, very interesting. And I think very beneficial to also think it that way, that we can mix in every step somehow with some kind of a visualization or other software components to get the better experience, actually.
Absolutely. I really value that hiring assessment was part of my early experience. It's because still to this day, I would say that that's the most research based data product that I've ever worked on. Like I said, we were actually partnered with a university, right, conducting this research to develop this questionnaire, and that really was a foundational part of that particular data product. I haven't seen that be normal, right? And most of the time what I'm working on is the type of thing that you described, right? We have data in a database. Let's figure out how to make it valuable and then how to surface that value right to the user. And the hiring assessment was quite a different story. Yes, for sure.
That's very interesting. Okay, so how is adding a software component to data product, how you think it's beneficial? And what are the ways that you are doing it? Like, how do you think about it, make it like more beneficial?
So in those early experiences, as I said, we were really depending on services. And I saw from those early experiences that we weren't getting the results with our customers, like we weren't getting the adoption. Our customers didn't really feel passionately positive about our products. It wasn't getting the value that I think they deserved. And it really had to do with the user experience, the customer experience of those products. And I didn't believe that it was scalable or the best experience to have a person in the middle. And so I started really focusing on, okay, if I'm going to build a data product, what is the most effective way for me to embed that? And recall that for the most part, again, I'm talking about decision support data products of, I'm surfacing data and insights. And so I went on a bit of an evolution. I would say a midpoint from totally services dependent would be, having a good user experience where someone can interact with data and get everything that they need of it, but it's happening outside of the main workflow. And I call that a midpoint because you do still have sort of a good piece of software, a good piece of visualization, of interaction that the user can have with the data product. But the big barrier in that midpoint is that it's happening outside of the workflow. So a key learning that I had during that phase of my career was, okay, great, I've improved the way that I can present data, make that an enjoyable experience, inform actions, but I'm still not getting the adoption that I'm looking for because no one wants to leave what they're doing and then go out to a different platform. Even if you can click a link and it opens in a new window, it's still very disruptive to sort of leave the place where you're doing things and taking actions and then go out to a different place entirely to go and try to find the data to inform the next thing that you want to do, and then go back to your platform to take that action. And so what I ended up doing in the later phases of my career is really thinking about the data product, which is, again, I have an action that I'm trying to help someone make in a more informed way, a better decision that they want to make. How can I really more fully integrate the data, the visualizations, the information that they need to make that decision alongside the piece in the software where that decision is being made? And so, for instance, I ended up building a coaching tool that was really a software-first mindset from the user experience perspective we really started with the software development team. We also had analysts working and data engineers working on the back end to make sure that we had good data and valuable visualizations for it. But in the coaching tool, the key value was being able to surface these insights of which of these employees are high performers who I need to focus on retaining, right? And make sure that I don't lose them from my business. And then which of my employees maybe aren't doing so well, and what are the key things I should be coaching them on so that they can improve. And we were able to design a user interface that was, again, software first. You can sort of take those actions on, this is the coaching plan. This is what I'm going to execute and implement with them, right alongside where you have those insights showing up of like, hey, this is how this employee is performing, so that you can inform what that conversation is going to look like for them or what next action you're going to take. And I would say that I'm probably the most proud of how that product turned out because it was really a seamless user experience and it was very well received in the market as a result. I don't know that the market would have even thought about the fact that it was a data product because it was an experience, right? It was an experience, and the fact that the value was really driven by data was something that my end users didn't have to know or care about. And I think that was an achievement in a lot of ways.
Thank you so much for sharing. Okay, picking about teams, I wanted to ask that a little bit later, but because you mentioned it, How is the team structure when you have both data product and software integrated?
I'll say that I don't want my next statements to be perceived as like, oh, she's saying this is the best practice, because I think that we can all learn from each other there. But I can tell you what worked in this situation for me, which is that on our product team, we had a product manager and a product owner who both had data and analytics backgrounds. And so myself, I was the product manager, and I had a fantastic product owner that I was partnered with, and I just loved working with. But he had a data background as well. And so we did a lot of the heavy lifting of what you might think about a data analyst doing on a data product team, but really we were in product roles. Beyond that, we also had the software engineers who were building the actual product. We had a dev manager who led those software engineers. We had an architect who was overseeing the software architecture side of things. And we also had a data engineer who was helping manage the efficiency and the quality of that database and all of the transformations therein. So that was it. Sorry?
Any designer?
Oh, gosh. I can't forget the incredible contributions that, yes, we had a UX designer who designed the overall experience. The way that workflow worked, I think, was a little bit interesting in the sense that because I had a data background and this was a database product, in my prototype that I gave my designer to sort of kick off this conversation, I had grabbed the appropriate data from real tables and a production database to make sure that I could do the transformations and build the charts and the visualizations that would add value from a data perspective in this experience. And I gave it to her as an Excel prototype, right? That was the lo-fi prototype, was in Excel, but it was also sort of a proof of concept because I needed to make sure that the data really worked for the types of visualizations that I was asking her to build. Because again, she didn't come from a data background, but she was an incredible user experience designer. So she took this silly little Excel prototype that I had created, and she made it an actually wonderful user experience that you could interact with and displayed the insights better than I had in the prototype, of course, but it was all rooted in the reality of what the data was capable of doing. And I think it was a really beautiful collaboration.
That's awesome. Were there any challenges in that team structure?
I don't think about primarily challenges that we had in the team structure. It worked really well. But again, I want to emphasize that both product people actually came from a data background and then came into product, and it happened to go well. And that's the part that I don't want to be construed as like advice. If you have a really strong data person, but then who doesn't have a data background, well, please supplement with a data analyst. I think that makes sense. And you guys can figure out the work structure that works for you. The part that we had the most difficult time with actually is that the idea that I had at the time was that it would be more efficient for us to integrate with a business intelligence provider who specialized in embedded insights, right? Like, and so I tried to do my due diligence and partnered with our architect, and we ended up selecting a business intelligence vendor who we thought we could leverage their software as a starting point for some of the data visualizations and slicing and dicing and different things we need to do in the tool, but then integrate it fully into our software experience. And working with the third-party vendor was the most difficult part, actually, of getting that product designed and launched. And so I have different views of working with third-party software and whether that actually speeds you up or not these days. But I think the way that I would go about the process was the same. We did the due diligence that we could do, and we partnered, across software architecture and data architecture. We did the best that we could, but it just didn't. It was difficult to work with. So after that, I started telling people like, man, I'm just going with high charts next time. I don't need any BI. But it's you learn those lessons every time though. But that was the most difficult part of that build.
Yeah, I can imagine. Okay. Thanks so much for sharing. So again, around those lines, what are the steps that you take to define, okay, what type of software components, for example, this data product needs, where to integrate, like all of those discovery phase in the beginning, for example?
I'm a really big fan of the jobs to be done framework. I was introduced to it pretty early in my career, and if anyone listening isn't familiar with that, Clayton Christensen, coined it, and he has a famous talk that you can go and I'll try not to bastardize it here. You can go listen to the talk yourself, but it's about the job that a milkshake is doing, right? And he uses this example of a fast food milkshake and what are people really trying to achieve when they buy that milkshake? And so I think about that. Another sort of famous one is people don't, nobody wants a drill. Everybody wants a 1/4-inch hole in the wall, right? And so, what's really the job that you're trying to do versus the tool that you're going to select to do it? And so I think about that with all of my products, and those are the types of questions that I ask my customers. And again, keeping in mind that I operate in a B2B context, what that often means is that I'm going to decision makers at my customer's company and asking them about their strategic priorities, because that's really the job to be done, is they want to accomplish those strategic priorities. And my responsibility is to figure out what data I have access to that can contribute to them achieving those strategic priorities and create an experience that helps them do that. That's always my starting point. As I go through my first customer interviews, they're extremely exploratory, but I would say that usually about 5 to 8 interviews in, you start to hear a lot of themes. And there's a certain point in these customer interviews where I can really tell I'm gaining traction, because I will get excited that I feel like I've heard the same thing maybe about 4 times, and I start I just won't be able to resist the urge to reach for a piece of paper and start sketching out, is this kind of what you're talking about? Does this, start to get you where you want to be? So from there, it's a really informal transition, but that's when I start getting feedback on the earliest lo-fi prototypes, is really just sketching with the customer and getting feedback on that. And then I go forward to my Excel prototypes, and I'll get feedback on Excel prototypes of hey, I actually validated, I have this data, this is what I can share. Does this help you accomplish that goal, right? But always going back to validating that this is what the customer, the user, the decision maker is trying to achieve, and how can I help them do that? I also like validating with surveys. I start with qualitative interviews, but once I've had enough qualitative interviews to have an idea of, what types of options to include on a quantitative survey, I really love gut checking myself and doing surveys to make sure that I understand how prevalent it is in the marketplace that this type of problem needs to be solved, and that I have a viable solution to doing it.
Can you give an example of those qualitative survey, or even quantitative, anything that you do on those surveys?
Yeah. And let me know if this answers your question or goes deep enough for what you're asking, but I'll just give the example of the strategic priorities. When I first joined a company, and I guess this is other context about my career, every time I've changed companies, I've changed industries. So I haven't worked in the same industry. I'm learning the industry every time as I start. So anytime I'm going into a new situation, I need to learn those things about the market so that then I can move forward. So I don't start out with a survey, for instance. I start out actually going and making introductions to customers and saying, hey, what are your top priorities? And I have to ask that question a few times, just very open-ended, qualitatively, to understand what the smattering of responses and the different ways that people talk about that and articulate it, and what the commonalities are, what the edge cases are. I'll also read some market industry reports around that time to get familiar with the language. But that's one example of, right, I'll just ask that very open-ended question. What are your strategic priorities? Also, what are you actually going to spend money on this year along the lines of those strategic priorities, right? Oh, that's really interesting. That sounds like a really important goal to achieve for your company. Are you planning on spending money to help achieve it this year, right? Sometimes the answer is no. And if the answer is no, that's bad news for me wanting to sell them software. So I try to understand which goals also have financial imperatives that folks want to spend money on it. And that's all qualitative. But then I will ask the same question in the survey. I'll survey a broad audience. What are your strategic priorities? But then I will have a smattering of the answers, maybe 5 to 7 answers. Usually it will be like a select 3 kind of a thing, because I need people to force rank. They can't select all that apply, because I don't want you to select all 7. But top 2, top 3 priorities, that's one of the questions that I will ask. And then I'll get a great like percentage sample size that says, oh, okay, like these are the top 2 priorities for the industry, not just for these couple people that I talked to. And I can feel confident that I'm achieving that. I like doing surveys, both qualitative and quantitative, multiple times in the process. So what I just described is at the very front end of my process. A little bit later on, once you've gotten to the point of, oh, I have a concept that I think I can build that solves this problem, then I'll do the same thing where I'll go out and have some qualitative conversations to discuss, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Can you give me some feedback? Talk about how this does or doesn't solve your problem. And then I will do another quantitative survey that says, basically along the lines of, here's a concept description. Oh gosh, I'm struggling to think of what the exact wording of the last survey that I did was. But basically, right, like here's the concept description. Do you believe this would help? Does this help address one of your top strategic priorities? Is this something that you could spend money on? Validating that people will buy something is a very tricky business. So I don't take any of these surveys as gospel, but I do use multiple ways of continuing to triangulate this feedback and make sure that we continue to feel like we're on the right track.
Thank you so much. On the B2B side, do you get to validate or talk to the end users as well, or is it just usually decision maker?
It depends on what I'm trying to achieve with the product. And so this is probably a good moment to talk about sort of the company that you work for's strategic priorities as well in the marketplace. And so I'll share that often the reason that we're building a data product is because strategically we need to get closer to the decision makers. So for instance, if it's an HR platform, okay, great. So we have a bunch of HR administrators using our solution, but does the CFO care about anything that we're doing? And in order to get the CFO to care, we need to give the CFO data that helps address his most burning questions. And then he sees value in our platform. But the CFO is never going to log in and, create a job requisition. So we have fewer connection points with the CFO, and our desire is to create a connection point to the CFO. And so in that example, the CFO is the decision maker, but the CFO is also the person that I'm trying to figure out how to engage. And so they become the user. In other situations where it's focused on maybe I need to create a dashboard that helps an HR administrator be more effective in their processes. And, so I'm creating a dashboard that's going to surface where things are in the pipeline, completion percentages, that type of dashboard. Then absolutely I would go and speak to HR administrators to understand what their goals are and how this does or doesn't help accomplish their goals. For sure.
Thank you so much. So in the process of, in the discovery process in the beginning, you have a data background, so it's a lot easier when you do the interviews yourself or design the surveys yourself. But let's say if there is a product manager or a data product manager that does not have a lot of data background, so when do you think, at what a stage they will involve the data analyst or even the data specialists in the team? Is it like at the beginning of the discovery, or you do a lot of discoveries and then you involve them?
I think that it's probably appropriate to do enough discovery as the product manager to understand at least a hypothesis of the problem that you think you need to try to solve for, or even just sort of a menu of options. Hey, these are the things that would add the most value. And then, right, I think that you should have a hypothesis about that. But as soon as you have a hypothesis, like even very early, hey, I'm not sure, but I'm just thinking about these things, I would encourage folks to include the data analyst, because I feel the same way about user experience. By the way, I include user experience as soon as I possibly feel like it's just not a waste of their time, right? I'll have some really open exploratory conversations when I don't even know exactly what I'm looking for. But as soon as I have an idea of what it might be that we should achieve, I include UX, and I would make the same recommendation for data. On the data side in particular, the reason I say that is because the process that I described earlier, whereby I was the one going into the database and make, oh, okay, yes, we do have data that solves this. I can join these tables. This is going to make sense. We can make a visualization that helps solve this problem. You really need that gut check so that you don't get too far off the beaten path, and you make sure that the data and the vision for what the data is trying to accomplish really is unified, and you don't end up with a Frankenstein product later on that you couldn't quite execute.
I totally agree. Okay, thank you so much. Any final words of wisdom, suggestion, recommendation for anyone who may want to try the same method?
I think one thing we didn't talk about, and it's not really strictly a product management topic, but I feel is extremely important, is what I've come to call agile project management or agile program management, which is we had struggles, integrating with that business intelligence platform, as I mentioned. And you hear so many examples in every different industry, not just data products, software products, any kind of product, any kind of internal engineering project even, right? Of, oh, it's facing another delay. Oh, it's facing another delay. And something that was supposed to take 6 months or 8 months to start out with takes 3 years. And everyone, loses faith in the project. And I've seen that so many times in my career, and I've never wanted to be that. And so I'll say we had those problems with the business intelligence solution, but the fact that we were constantly able to identify, okay, how much further do we have to go in the project? We had actually defined really more comprehensively what is it that we want to be able to deliver that will be our MVP. MVPs are not a new concept, but being able to track sort of percent complete along that path to MVP really gave us visibility when we were falling behind. And so that knowledge of, hey, we're actually thrown off track. We're not going to be able to launch on time if we don't find another way around this integration. Like, we can't just keep waiting weeks and weeks for it to sort itself out. We have to find another way if we want this project to be delivered. I think really keeping an eye on whether you're on track or not is an underrated skill for product management. And I really think, especially when you're dealing with more complexity, when you add data to a software product or when you add software to a data product, just really having that perspective of, are we on track? Are the dependencies slowing us down? And having a view, like a PMO sort of view of the project, is extremely helpful to keeping it on track. If you're in a situation where you can partner with PMO so that you can stay focused on sort of the strategic, are we building the right thing, instead of the project management, then that is ideal. But if someone on your team can serve that role of, a lot of teams don't have the luxury of having a PMO, right? So if someone on your team can add the value of serving as that role of, okay, I'm going to sort of keep track of this sprint by sprint and see if we're making the right progress that we should be making to deliver on time, then I think that's an extremely valuable piece of the puzzle that I would encourage, especially as you start thinking about the increased complexity that you're working with here.
Thank you so much. This is a really great recommendation to everyone. Thanks so much, Katy. It was very, very great talking to you, hearing from your experience. I hope really it's useful for everyone as well. I really enjoyed and learned a lot. And thanks for joining. Hope to have you again.
Thank you so much, Frannie.
Bye, everyone.